In today's episode of Locked On Pistons podcast, we are joined by John Karalis of the Locked On Celtics to figure out, is a big step back coming for Boston this year, and are they behind the Detroit Pistons now? We'll talk about it today's episode of Locked On Pistons podcast. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I am your host, Ku Khahil. I've been covering the Detroit Pistons for the last 4 years for the Locked On Network, been a credential media member over the last 3 years, and I appreciate all of you guys who make Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is closer than you think. Actually, it's tomorrow. First game, Thursday Night Football. And right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets. Download the FanDuel app at FanDuel.com to get started today. Today, we are joined by friend of the podcast, John Karalis, Locked On Celtics host. We're going to be discussing, are the Celtics taking a major step back this year? What are the goals for Boston this year in a year without Jason Tatum? And has Detroit passed Boston, at least for this year now? So, John, before we get into it, how you doing, man? Thank you for coming on.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Yeah. This is my comeuppance tour. I'm going to all of the teams that, all the fan bases who are like, oh, that guy's an arrogant jerk. And like, okay, yep. Now the Celtics are taking a step back. Everybody can, laugh at me and the Celtics.
I was going to say, welcome to the middle of the pack. It's been a long time since
man.
Welcome back.
It's interesting to be sitting there and like 40 wins, 41 wins. I mean, is it, yeah. My off season just got a lot longer. So, hey, you know what? It happens, man. It's cyclical, and the Tatum injury kind of changed a ton, and we'll see what they do with it, because to your point here about the big step back right away for the Celtics, like, big step back right now for the Celtics, but is it, I think maybe the biggest question is how big, how long lasting? Is it just a temporary thing? And I think that's the big thing for the Celtics this year.
Yeah, that's the question obviously we're going to open up with. I wanted to ask you, because they moved on from Kristaps Porzingis. They've moved on from Jrue Holiday, and obviously there's been a lot of noise about the Celtics trying to get underneath the second apron, trying to get under the aprons, the luxury tax, whatever, to save some money, which they've done a good job of. I think they still have some salary to offset if they really want to get completely underneath the luxury tax. I don't know if they're actually going to do that or not, but sounds like I saw a report last week that maybe they could still be moving off of Anthony Simons. So who knows what's going to happen? I'm sure you probably are plugged in more than us, but question I have is, with all that happening, like you said, just how big of a step back is coming for Boston this year? They don't have Tatum now, because Tatum, I mean, unfortunately, obviously, no one wants to see anyone go down. He looks like he's going to miss the full year. They've obviously, because of Tatum going down, like I said, they've moved on from Kristaps, Jrue Holiday, big contracts, and brought in some guys. I look at the front court on this team, I'm like, it's not looking great. They still have Brown. They still have Derek White. How big of a step back are you guys expecting from the Boston Celtics?
So I just look at it like the Celtics are not as good as the good teams in the East. So Cleveland, New York, and then who's next? Is Detroit, Orlando? Who's in Atlanta? Who's in that mix after that? The Celtics aren't quite as good. Certainly not as the top two teams, and probably not as whoever the third, fourth seed. But they're not as bad as your tanking teams, Washington, Charlotte, Brooklyn, Toronto, probably not as bad as those teams. And they're probably, like you said, middle of the pack. So it's from where they were, it is a big step back. But they do have, like you said, Jaylen Brown, Derek White. I don't know how long Anthony Simons is going to be around, but they will have Peyton Pritchard off the bench. They have Sam Hauser off the bench. They have guys that have been around that are good and are super competitive, and they're not going to throw lineups out there where you're like, ooh, that's who you're playing. So unless obviously something happens. So they're not going to go into like full on tank mode. Now, if I don't know, Jaylen Brown sprains an ankle, pulls a hamstring, misses a month. Now we're talking a different story. But a healthy team, relatively speaking, is going to be a mediocre team. And the thing that is most important is maintaining the health of these guys long term, and figuring out what you have around these guys. Because I think the Celtics are going to start going kind of, I think Indiana Pacers are becoming, and OKC to a degree, but Pacers are kind of like becoming the model of depth and good solid players that can be your third, fourth, fifth, sixth best. There's a debate, and all of these you got 4 or 5 guys that can all be that good. I think that's where the Celtics are trying to figure out, and that's why they brought in a bunch of guys that were cut, maybe didn't get the right opportunity. So it's a big step back from where they were. But what they're hoping is that they can kind of plant that foot and take that big step forward next year.
Yeah, and before we wrap up here, I want to ask you this. Is there any, within the community, is there any hope for maybe a surprise? Everyone is penciling in the Celtics to just take a major step back. I think that's universally what everyone's expecting. Is there any within the community, whether it be fans, whether it be players, executives talk about, coaches talk, is there any belief that maybe the Celtics could actually surprise with Brown, White, Pritchard, and these players that they brought in despite losing Tatum and the players we mentioned earlier?
Well, there's, we all do it. Best case scenario, right? And best case scenario almost never happens. But the best case scenario for Boston is that, Neemias Queta, who was their third string center last year, hey, he's playing okay for Portugal at Eurobasket, and maybe he's developing. He picked up basketball late. Maybe he's just picking up some things a little bit later in his career, and maybe he'll be a passable, decent defender. And you got Chris Boucher, and you're like, okay, maybe that a big man rotation that I've been saying is maybe the worst in the NBA. You say, hey, well, look, maybe they actually can do a little something, because Boucher's blocked a couple of shots in his career. Queta is a big 7-foot guy. He blocks some shots. If you can get some rim protection, you can play fast. Well, Jalen on his own, I think this past season has done he did a really good job of handling things when Tatum missed a few games here and there. If he can be the accepting the double team, draw guys out, kick it to the right guy, let his teammates play 4-on-3, maybe give and go. They can cut, they can play faster, they can up their field goal attempts. If all of that stuff comes to pass, and Derek White is great, and Pritchard has a 6th man of the year off the bench, or whatever, if he's a starter, who knows? If all of these things come together, then you're like, well, hey, look, not a top 2 seed, but depending on how the rest shakes out, I think after Cleveland and New York, there are a lot of teams that you're going to start making a case. This team has a chance. Detroit has a chance at the 3 seed. Orlando has a chance. You can even talk yourself into, Milwaukee or Atlanta or some of these teams. So all of this is a long-winded way to say that if a lot of these things go Boston's way, acknowledging that things like this never come to pass, but then there is a chance it could surprise. And I didn't even mention that I do believe that Tatum will come back during the season. I don't think his entire season is out, because I think he's a little bit ahead of schedule. I think that, at 27 years old, the type of shape he was in, he got that surgery the very next morning. He was lucky to be in New York with the number 1 guy there with an innovative kind of new surgery that's shown to get guys back faster. I just feel like and I'm not saying this is hey, Tatum's going to come back and lead them into the playoffs, but I'm just saying that we might, I'm going to say it's a decent chance that we will see Jason Tatum put on a Celtics uniform at some point during the season, even if it's glorified rehab. Somehow I think we will see Jason Tatum on the floor for the Celtics. And again, if everything goes right, you're like, whoa, he comes back, he does well. The Celtics get into the playoffs. He finds his way somewhere during the playoffs. And it's like, oh crap, now we got to play the Celtics in the playoffs. And they're the 7th seed, but Tatum looks okay. and Jalen looks great, and oh no. So that's the ultimate best case scenario.
Yeah, that's interesting. If Tatum comes back next year, I think that would be. I mean, everyone's hoping for a full recovery for him. But if I get to watch Jason Tatum basketball next year, I'd be happy for that because Jason Tatum is one of my favorite players to watch. So if he comes back fully healthy next year, that'd be a lot of fun. Coming up though, goals for the Boston Celtics this year. I don't know if the goals are technically win the championship. So from a team that has been championship or bust really the last few years, now what are the goals now for the Boston Celtics? We'll break it down coming up. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is almost here, starting tomorrow. Thursday Night Football, Cowboys, Eagles. And FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. If you're a Lions fan who is not afraid of the Micah Parsons trade and think the Lions will still win the division, well, FanDuel is not in line with you. They think that the Green Bay Packers have just as good of a shot to win the division than the Detroit Lions. Go and take advantage of those odds now that the Lions have lowered from the clear favorites. Better odds for you. Go take it. I think the Lions will still come out with the division, even though Micah Parsons in the division is pretty scary. That's the kind of thing you can do over there at FanDuel. I've been using FanDuel for years. Super easy to use, super self-explanatory, but most importantly, super fun to use. So if you are ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet, and you'll get $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins to use across the app. That's FanDuel.com to download the app, bet $5, win $300 in bonus bets with FanDuel. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. Another great way to support the podcast. Today's episode is the first one we're doing of the Eastern Conference preview. We'll be talking with all the Eastern Conference teams. Yes, even the Brooklyn Nets. We'll try to talk with them if they want to talk about the Brooklyn Nets. I don't know. Sorry. But we're talking with John. We're talking with John from Locked On Celtics first here. We're going to get into the goals. The goals for the Boston Celtics this year. John, obviously over the last few years, Celtics won a championship 2 years ago. It feels like really like, I don't know if championship or bust is the right word, but since Tatum and Brown have really been in Boston, they've been a contender every year. So maybe not the first few years it's been championship or bust, but the last few years it feels like every year the goal has been win a championship, win a championship, win a championship. And they've had 2 finals appearances. They've been close. A lot of people thought they had a chance to repeat this past year. They've been a fantastic basketball team. But like we talked about earlier, Tatum goes down. A lot of these players leave. Things change. So what are the goals now for the Celtics this year? Because I don't think it's championship. So what are they looking forward to accomplish this year?
I think ultimately it's finding pieces that fit well around Tatum and Brown. And, you know, that's why they went out and got Luka Garza and Josh Minot and, you know, Anthony Simons or whatever Anthony Simons, you know, becomes after a trade. They're looking for guys that can fill a role that you might say, really, that guy? And, you know, he becomes, you know, one of the, you know, I don't know, pick a pacer that you're like, that guy's burning us right now. And so I do reference the Pacers a lot in my analysis of this year's Celtics, because I think in the second apron era, that's going to be, I think, the blueprint to kind of follow, where scouting departments become more important than ever. And you obviously have to hit on your number one guy, right? Tatum, Cade, your guy that you're riding, you know, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, right? And you hope that maybe one of the guys in the middle of the draft becomes your, you know, number two that you can, you know, however he develops. But then it's the rest is fit. And if you can put together a roster that just fits well, is a bunch of tryhards, and, you know, is all on the same page, that's going to be, I think, the team that is at the top of, you know, the odds. And so I think the Celtics see this opportunity. Jaylen Brown is 29 this year. So this is his final year in his 20s in the NBA, which is, you know, kind of scary because there's really not much time. That time in your 30s goes quick. Tatum is only a couple years away. Derek White's already in his 30s. So I think the Celtics their goals are you got to find the guys that fit. And, I won't rule out the possibility of like Jaylen Brown going and, being traded next offseason to help facilitate the fit. I don't know if it's going to be Tatum and Brown for the next 2-3 years, which it easily could be, or if it's going to be Tatum, Brown goes off. Like, let's say Brown has an amazing year and he's like, look, I've spent all this time as the number 2 guy. I just had an amazing all NBA year as a number 1 guy. I turned 30 next year. I need to be able to go lead a team for the next, few years into my early 30s. I need to know what that's going to be. So could be a mutually beneficial. Somebody's looking for a number 1 guy. Jaylen has proved it. The Celtics say, okay, we're going to, try to get our center that fits around Tatum, that fits around White, and we can kind of cobble that together. So the goal is the fit, figuring out the fit. And it's not about how many wins. I'm sure there are guys like Jaylen and, Joe Mazzulla that want to prove people wrong and be like, hey, we're going to win 48 games. Sure, go for it. But that's not the goal. They're not winning a championship this year. They're going to be a middle of the pack team probably. So it's about championship next year, or if you want to give Tatum a full year under his belt after the injury, the following year, because then after that, second apron, CBA, the Celtics are going to have to fall into the rebuild at some point. So it's about fit in the next 2, maybe 3 years of like squeezing the last ounces of contention out of this roster.
Yeah, and speaking to the fit, I had a question concerning that. You kind of mentioned maybe moving Brown next year if he has a great year and maybe he wants to become a 1 and he's like, hey, I've been doing this my whole career. I want to go see what it's like to be a 1 and, whatever. The question I had was, is there any way that this year, because I've seen a lot of reports about what the Celtics want this year to be. They've mentioned the fit. I've seen some people suggest maybe the Celtics should just rebuild. They should do what the Mavericks did and tank a year or take at the end of the year and try to get a top pick and then come back, whatever. Is there any possibility? I have 2 scenarios I want to throw at you. Is there any possibility, one, that the Celtics try to use this year, mid-year, to try maybe sell off of White and or Brown to try to get a lot of assets back to rebuild a team moving forward around Tatum once he's back healthy? That's 1. And then 2, is there any way possible that the Celtics try to use this season as kind of more take chances on some guys that are maybe like not second contract guys, but maybe trade for some guys that are like, hey, we want to take a chance on them. Maybe they blow up with us. Maybe they go crazy for us. And now we have something moving forward. Like, which one do you think either of those options are possible? And which ones do you think is more likely? Are either of them not possible at all?
I think it's the second one, right? I don't think they're tanking. Like I just don't see it. And maybe they do. I can't rule anything out, right? If Jaylen is having an awesome year and someone at the trade deadline's like, this is a deal, this is a Godfather offer, and the Celtics have to consider it. But I don't think the goal is to just outright tank, because then, you might as well move off of Jason. You might as well move off of everybody. And I just don't think you get a core like this. You don't get your Jason Tatums all the time. And I know he's coming off that, terrible injury, but he's, again, he in his prime, all of the things I laid out earlier, I feel like he can come back and be pretty close to, if not back to his normal self. Like, this is not the Achilles injuries of 15 years ago. Innovations in the surgery, the recovery, all of that stuff are making it easier to recover, and you can come back and be your old self depending on how you play. So I don't think they want to give up on Tatum, and I don't think tanking is the way to go when you got a guy already in his prime. If Tatum was 24, maybe we'd be having a different conversation. The way I think the Celtics are approaching this is, you've got Tatum. If you can keep Brown, great. Either way, I'm kind of cool with. I can see good results either way. You keep those few guys that you have, and then, Minnesota cuts Garza, boom, bring them in. Somebody cuts somebody in a buyout. Someone, if the Kuminga thing pans out where somebody has to cut salary, the Celtics can maybe hop in and be like, we'll take that salary. And maybe that's just a guy that needs more opportunity. It's like you have the nice blazer and maybe the pants, and you've got like limited funds to go get your shirt, your tie, your shoes, all the accessories. So you're like, okay, I got a couple of nice pieces. Now I'm going to the clearance racks to see if I can dress this up and make, have my other pieces make the other stuff look better than they actually are. So that's, I think, where the Celtics approach is.
All right, fair enough. Coming up, I want to talk with John about Boston versus Detroit. Is Detroit finally better than the Boston Celtics? We've waited a long time. Is that finally something we can argue about? We'll talk about it coming up. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. Boston versus Detroit, John. Who would have thought that you'd be in 2025 arguing Detroit better than Boston? But I guess we'll get right into it.
Yeah.
I believe that the Pistons will finish ahead than the Boston Celtics this year in the Eastern Conference. I think the Pistons will be fighting for a 4-5 seed in the East with Atlanta. That's how I'm seeing it shake out. Do you believe Boston, 1, is better than Detroit, or 2, could finish higher than Detroit, despite the fact that they went through all the changes we've obviously discussed over the last 20 minutes or so?
No, I agree with you. I think the Pistons are going to finish ahead.
How much did that hurt to say?
The Celtics. Hey, listen, man, it is what it is, man. It is what it is. Look, I'm not saying this just because I'm on the Locked On Pistons podcast. And it's kind of weird coming from a Boston guy considering the Celtics and Pistons history, but I have a ton of respect for the progress that this Pistons team has made. I think going back like 2 seasons ago, maybe 3, the Pistons have just been a pain for the Celtics. No matter how good the Celtics are, I just always look at the Pistons like, oh man, this is not gonna be easy. If the Celtics aren't playing right, they're going to lose this game. And they've lost a couple to the Pistons. I'm like, they're just, this is a try-hard team. Cade's good. Like, he's going to figure it out. I think the Pistons are kind of in that, like they're taking that next step this season. Like, I like where they've gone. My loyalty, as I say all the time, is to the game of basketball. And so I will give credit where credit is due. The Pistons are earning this praise for all the work that they've done. They should finish. I think they could finish in the top 4. I think that's home court in the first round of the playoffs is certainly possible for the Pistons. The Celtics, I think they're probably going to be like a 6 or 7 seed. I don't want them to be in the play-in, but if they're teetering in the play-in, I'd rather at that point just like, okay, if Jalen has proven what he needs to prove, has he gotten his 65 games? Good, sit him. Just like at that point, I'd rather just at that point tank than be fighting for that 7 seed. But I still think the Celtics are going to be good enough, considering how bad the East is, to be in that mix. So, but the Pistons, yeah, man, I don't know what else to say. The Pistons are going to be a good team, and I think they will beat the Celtics plenty of times this upcoming season.
We'll see about that. I do want to get you.
I know people are expecting to be like, oh, great, the Boston guy's on here. He's going to be a jerk. We're going to boo. And I'm like, no, man, respect. It is what it is. Like, I can't look at what's happening on this offseason and be like, I can't lie. I'm not Stephen A. Smith, man. I'm not going to come on here and be like, just yelling for the sake of yelling. I'm like, no, man, Pistons are good, man.
So I want to get your thoughts on the Pistons before we wrap up. From an outsider's point of view, the Pistons, obviously, like you mentioned last year, had finished in 6th seed, had a really good first-round series. Cade kind of blew up, kind of getting that respect now across the league. They come back this year. From an outsider's point of view, what are your questions about this team? Do you have any, like, oh, I don't know about this, or I need to find out. I need to know if they can do this before I really believe in them. Or do you believe that they actually are going to be really this? What are your thoughts and maybe questions concerning this team from an outsider's point of view heading into this year?
I don't know, man. I feel like I've seen like steady progress with these guys. And so, I am kind of curious as to like, how's Duncan Robinson going to do? And, like the Karis LeVert, like those guys. But I don't know. I don't sit there and first of all, I'm not like breaking down everything about the Pistons. So I'm not getting granular like you are. I like their roster. I like Cade. I think, Asar Thompson is, he's pretty good and he's going to, make an impact. And, you've got bigs, you've got wings, you've got a point guard, you got a big physical point guard. Like you've got all the pieces. My biggest question about the Pistons is, having it all come together. Like again, I talk about fit so much, like how's this fit going to be this upcoming season? And that's the thing. Like, what moves are there to be made in the middle at the trade deadline if they need to make a move? So I'm just more looking for them to take the next step to gel, for Cade to take that next step and be like, hey, be the central, willing this team to, which he's done, but willing them to more success and just being that the kind of guy that can, like the heat from that heliocentric kind of player can that really kind of light everybody else up. I don't know another way to say that. So yeah,
Right.
I think the Pistons are, when I said before, they're taking that next step. Like I want to see that cohesion, that like execution. I want to see them, they have like the attitude, they have, I think, the plan. I just want to see like less mistakes. I want to see it more fluid. I want to see them kind of like the confidence in each other to just be like, hey, we know what we're doing now. I feel like that's where they start to take off.
Yeah, and I think that's where the president of basketball operations, Trajan Langdon's at with it as well. He's talked about all offseason about wanting to find out answers about these young guys. Jalen Duren, Jay and Ivy are both up for extensions. They haven't been extended. I don't think they're going to be. I think Trajan's walking into this year kind of like what you're mentioning. He just wants to know, do all these guys fit together? We had a fun year last year, but I don't want to commit all the money and all the resources to a one-off fun year where you didn't see Ivy for half the year, and you just want to know, can all these guys fit together before we commit long-term? Is this the roster of the future? So I've said this before on the podcast a lot, all off seasons. I think the Pistons and Trajan are looking at it like, if they take a step back win-loss wise, but they get answers about the rest of the core moving forward, I think he'd take that. I think if it results in more wins, I think he'd take that too. But I think he's more so just trying to figure out, hey, does Asar, Ivy, Duren fit with Cade? Does Ron, Asar, Duren fit with Cade? Is Ivy the backcourt mate of Cade? Like, is that where I want to go? Because again, they're up for extensions this offseason. Asar's up for an extension next offseason. Cade's extension's kicking in already. So you kind of got, and like you mentioned earlier with the second apron now, you have to be smart about your financials. And I do agree with you that I think it's going to be, teams are going to be built now more like, I mean, OKC is hard to say because they're just, crushing every pick they make. But like Indiana is a very deep team of just really good role players who all play well together, play the right way, and fit with each other. I think teams are going to go that route. So I think that's where Trajan's trying to figure out this year. They're hoping that results in a lot of wins, that the young guys take steps forward. But I think they're trying to figure out the same thing you mentioned. They're just trying to figure out the fit of these guys and what's it going to look like when they all finally get a good sample size together, which they just haven't been able to have due to injuries over the last few years. But Pistons, I do think will finish above the Celtics. But I think the Celtics will be back to contention next year. I very much am a fan of Tatum's. I think you guys will be right back to contention soon.
I think so too. I think the Celtics will figure it out. And like you said, with the Pistons and their extensions, like the way the CBA is, you can't miss. If you're going to give the guy the extension, he needs to be worth it. And you have enough talent here where if the fit isn't there, you can make a move and get talent back. Like the Pistons can't be afraid of doing that. Like the number one mistake the Pistons can make is what you said, is like getting caught up in this group is ascending and not like understanding like each year is its own thing. And the player, pick a player, right? Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, what he was last year or the last 2 years or whatever doesn't necessarily mean that next year he's going to be this. And if there's fundamental problems that, fit wise, you have to be willing to make a move, even if the guy's somewhat popular, just to get that fit right and just deal with the fan backlash. Because if you screw it up and give too many extensions to the wrong guys, you're just basically attaching a boulder to Cade Cunningham's neck and saying, okay, now go try to play basketball. And you can't do that. So I'm looking forward to the Celtics and the Pistons being at the top, like a playoff series,
That would be a lot of fun. Yes.
Maybe a conference finals somewhere, old school Celtics Pistons. That would be a lot of fun. I want to see that in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Hopefully the Pistons can improve their roster and these young guys can take a step forward to where when Tatum comes back, they can compete with the Celtics. I love the example you brought up, or the point you brought up about not being scared to move off of a guy that maybe is a fan favorite. I mean, Boston did it with Marcus Smart. They went out and traded a guy who was loved by the fan base and loved by the city, got Kristaps, and went on to win a championship. So sometimes you got to make moves like that. But we'll wrap it up there. John, let everybody know where they can find you and your work and the podcast, all that good stuff.
My written work is at Boston Sports Journal. So if you want to check that out there, obviously the podcast is Locked On Celtics and Locked On NBA Game Night on Friday nights. So that's on Twitter, X at John_Karalis. You'll find me from there. You'll find me.
Fair enough. Actually, last thing I want to say just real quickly, does Luka Garza have a chance? He's a former Piston, drafted by the Pistons. His family's really fun. I had his dad in the podcast. He's a good guy. They're good guys, but
he's going to get it. He's going to have a chance. He'll be given a chance to prove himself. That's like the number one thing for the Celtics. He'll get minutes and he'll have a chance. Like, my number one thing for Joe Mazzulla is don't get caught up in winning these games in November, December, January. They don't matter. This is a 2 regular season, right? For the Celtics, where this 82 games is like the first half where you're trying to, let's figure out if Luka Garza, you got to give Luka that opportunity. So then in the next 82 games, which is the second half of the season to me, you can have Tatum back and make your run. So yeah, he'll get time. And then it's up to him.
All right. We'll see. Wishing Luka the best of luck. Pistons fans still follow him. Wish him the best. His dad's great. I'm sure.
That's a good sign. Well, that's a good sign. I like that.
Yeah. If they play well, I'm sure you'll hear from his dad. His dad's but all right. Appreciate all of you guys making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's John from Locked On Celtics. I'm Ku, Locked On Pistons. And until next time, I will see you guys later. Stay safe out there, everybody.